In this movie, I'll introduce you to what I'm guessing is the most eagerly awaited new feature in Photoshop CC 2018, and that is the newly redesigned brushes panel, which allows you to save better brush presets. So not only can you save all of the brush settings, as we've been able to do in the past, but you can also save all the tool settings, which are located up here in the options bar, including the blend mode, opacity, flow, and all these other doodads. Plus, you can organize your presets into folders and subfolders. Now, the best way to understand what's going on here is to start off inside CC 2017 so we can see how things have been for the last many years. Now, notice that I've already selected the brush tool in advance. But brushes are compatible with more than just a brush tool. They work with the clone stamp tool, the history brush, all the way down to the dodge and burn tools, with the exception of the gradient tool, which doesn't need a brush. But I'm going to work with the standard brush, and let's see what I want to do is design a highlighter in order to highlight this subtitle. In that case, I'd start things off by going up to the window menu and choosing the brush command in order to bring up the brush panel. And then I'm going to crank the hardness value all the way up to 100%, and I'm going to take the size value up to 60 pixels. Now, if you take a look at the preview, you'll notice that it's a little bit lumpy, and that's a function of this default spacing value, which is set too high. What we need to do is take it down to 10%, which is going to give us a smooth brush. I'm also looking for a kind of calligraphic brush, so I'll take the roundness value down to 20%, and I'll set the angle to 77 degrees. And that's it. All right, now I'll just go ahead and hide the brush panel. Now, even though this is a pixel-based layer, I went ahead and rasterized the type because otherwise the file was unbelievably huge. But that doesn't mean I want to paint directly on this layer. In fact, I want to protect this layer, so I'll create a new one by pressing Control-Shift-N or Command-Shift-N on the Mac. And then I'll just go ahead and call this new layer Highlight and click OK. And that way, all of my type will remain unmolested. All right, now I want to paint with the shade of green that's associated with the Typekit logo. And you can bring up Typekit by going up to the type menu and choosing this first command. But I've already done that in advanced, and so I'm going to lift the color of that logo using the eyedropper tool. I don't know if you know this trick or not, but I'm going to go ahead and make Photoshop a little narrower like so that I can see Typekit running in the background. And then I'll start dragging inside the image window and then drag out until my cursor is right there above that bright green outline. And you can see over in the color panel that changes the foreground color. So this technique allows you to actually lift colors from other applications. It does, however, mess up the window, so I'll go ahead and make it wider once again, and then I'll press Command-0 or Control-0 on the PC in order to center my zoom. Now I'll go ahead and switch back to the brush tool, and I want the brush to interact with itself, so I'm going to change the blend mode from normal to multiply. Now that is not going to change how the brush interacts with the layer below. That's a function of the blend mode you assign here inside the Layers panel. But for now, I'm not going to worry about that. I am going to tap the 6 key, however, to take the opacity down to 60%. And then I'll just go ahead and paint while pressing the Shift key in order to paint a straight line, like so. And then I'll paint another one while holding the Shift key down to create a little bit of an overlap. And you can see, because I've set the blend mode to multiply, that those two brush strokes are interacting with each other. All right, now I just want to give it a little extra texture by clicking at the beginning and the end of each one of the brush strokes, like so. And then finally, I'll go down right to the Layers panel, and I'll change the blend mode for the entire layer to multiply. And that will give me an effect that is pretty darn close to a hand-rendered highlighter. All right, now that I've done all this work, of course, I want to save a preset. So I'll go up to the window menu and choose the Brush Presets command in order to bring up this old school panel. You'll see it's changed quite a bit inside the current version of the software. And then I'll just move my cursor over this dark gray region and I'll click in order to create a new brush. And I'll call it Highlighter, like so. I do want to capture the brush size, so I'll leave that checkbox turned on, and then I'll click OK. All right, now let's take a look at how I would later retrieve that preset. I'll go up to the brush icon on the far left side of the options bar and right-click on it and choose Reset Tool in order to reset everything, including all the brush settings, the blend mode, the opacity value, and so forth. And I'll go ahead and change the color here inside the color panel to red, let's say. And then notice if I start painting around, I get a pretty herky-jerky spiral here because I'm painting with a mouse. But you can see I am painting with the new color, and turns out I'm painting with the normal mode as well. And so if I painted multiple strokes, they will not interact with each other. All right, I don't want that garbage, so I'll press Command-Option-Z. That's Control-Alt-Z on the PC a couple of times to get rid of those brush strokes. All right, now I'll switch back to the preset I created just a moment ago. Now, it looks like it might be selected because it has this orange border, but in fact, it's not. You have to click on it in order to select it, at which point the border lights up blue, at least on this system. And then I'll hide the presets panel because I don't actually need it. And I'll go ahead and paint, once again, a big kind of spiral. And notice if I paint a little bit more that I am getting no interaction, and that's because the blend mode, the opacity value, and all the other stuff up here in the options bar was not saved with the preset. All right, let's compare that to how things work in the newest version of the software. I'll start things off the same way. I'll go ahead and switch to the brush tool, which you can get, of course, by pressing the B key. And I'll go up to the window menu, and this time I'm going to choose the brush settings command. So the old brush panel has been renamed. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same stuff. We have all the same options as before. So I'll crank the hardness value up to 100%. I'll increase the size value to 60. I will set the angle to 77 degrees. I'll set the roundness to 20%. And then I'll tab down to the spacing value and set it to 10%. All right, now I want to create a new layer by pressing Command-Shift-N or Control-Shift-N on the PC. I'll call this guy Highlight and press the Return key. And then I'll switch to the eyedropper tool once again. Got to do all these steps over. And I'll expose the Typekit logo in the background, and I'll go ahead and drag from the image window until I lift that shade of light green. Then I'll go ahead and make the interface wider again, and I'll press Command-0 or Control-0 to center my zoom. All right, now switch back to the brush tool. And I will change the blend mode for this brush to multiply. And I'll tap the 6 key to take the opacity value down to 60%. I am going to make one additional adjustment. Notice that we have this new option here, smoothing. It's totally awesome. We're going to be talking about it in a future movie. But for now, I'm just going to set it to 50%. And then I will paint across my text while pressing the Shift key like so. Now, you are going to get a slower response, and that's because of that smoothing value. Again, we'll be talking all about that. But otherwise, I'm just going to paint this highlighter effect the same way I did before. And then I will change the blend mode to multiply in order to produce this effect here. All right, now let's save out the brush by going to the window menu and choosing the Brushes command. This is not so much a redesigned panel as a totally new one. So they pretty much threw away the old brush presets panel and created this one in its place. Now, you can create a loose brush if you want to, one that is not included in a folder, but I want to keep things moderately tidy, so I'll go ahead and click on this little folder icon, and then I'll name this guy My Brushes, for lack of a better name, and I'll click OK. And now to create a new preset, you click on this little page icon along the bottom of the panel, and I'll call this guy Highlighter, and I'll make sure that I'm capturing the brush size. I'm also going to turn on Include Tool Settings, which may seem weird, but think about it from this perspective. Of course, we're saving the brush settings. We were always doing that. Now we can save the tool settings, which are located up here in the options bar and will vary depending on which of the editing tools is selected. All right, so I'll go ahead and turn on that checkbox, and I'll also turn on the Include Color checkbox. And that way I can name this guy Green Highlighter, let's say, and click OK. And notice this brush preview right there. We're seeing a tiny little tool icon. That tells us that we're saving the tool settings up here in the options bar, and then we have a little color swatch, which shows us that we're saving the color. We don't have to work that way, of course. I could create another variation on this brush by clicking on a little page icon once again, and I'll call this one just plain old highlighter, and I'll turn off Include Tool Settings and click OK, and this time we're not seeing either of those icons. All right, let's once again reset things by right-clicking on that little brush icon on the far left side of the options bar and choosing Reset Tool, which will reset everything as we're seeing right here. And I'll go ahead and change the color to red as well. And now notice if I were to paint, I would get that same goofy spiral. That is not interacting, by the way, with itself. All right, I'm going to undo that, of course. And I'll go ahead and click on the highlighter brush, the one that does not include the tool settings, and I will paint across my letters like so. And notice, even though I'm painting multiple times, I'm not getting any interaction at all. Compare that to green highlighter. If I select it and then start painting inside of the image window, notice a couple of things. First of all, I am most definitely getting an interaction, and that's because the mode is set to multiply, the opacity is set to 60%, and I'm also getting much smoother brush strokes because I've cranked that smoothing setting up to 50%. First of all, if you right-click in the image window to bring up the pop-up panel, you're going to see this slider down here at the bottom, which may seem a little confusing. After all, when I move the triangle, nothing happens. And that's because none of my folders are expanded. So if I twirl this guy open right here and scroll down as well, now you can see when I drag the slider triangle, I am changing the size of my preview. And that's possible inside the brushes panel as well. You can make those previews nice and big if you're so inclined, which is a great reason to convert your tool presets. So for years, people have been using tool presets, which you can get to by clicking the down arrow next to the little brush icon up here in the options bar, in order to save their brushes, because tool presets save not only brush settings, but they save all the settings in the options bar as well. The thing is, you don't get previews. So if you like, you can click on this little gear icon and choose Convert All to Brush Presets. Adobe is pretty excited about this feature, so by default, you'll get an alert message telling you what's happened. You also have the option of removing the tool presets after the conversion if you like. I'm just going to click OK, and now notice here in the Brushes panel that all of my tool presets have been converted to brushes. And so there you have it, the exciting and exceedingly practical world of brush presets that you can even organize into folders here inside Photoshop CC 2018.